channel. Today, we're gonna break down Jocko Willink speaking to an actual Top Gun instructor. I believe this Top Gun instructor did some advising for Top Gun. I'm gonna add some context to it using my experience as a former F-16 Thunderbird pilot and F-15E pilot.
Tell me, how was your life as a youngster?
Ruthless. My style as a juvenile, ran with a gang, slanged in the meanwhile.
I think at the end of this video, you're gonna have a better understanding of what it takes in the high stakes environment of flying fighter jets and how that could relate to whatever it is you're up to. Let me know what you're up to below and how you're applying this. I would love to know. Stay at the very end of the video to get my final thoughts on how I think they assess Top Gun from using the Jocko Willink perspective and the Top Gun instructor perspective. And before we get going, if you would, just dominate that like button for me. And hey, maybe even subscribe. Every time you like and subscribe, a pilot somewhere gets their wings. With that said, let's dive in to this Top Gun instructor speaking to Jocko Willink. Here we go.
So Navy and Marine Corps, and you go there and you learn to dogfight.
Amongst other things, yes. But that is the foundational thing you start to teach and learn up there.
And you scrap in the sky.
Yes.
You go up and you dogfight other really good pilots.
Yes.
And so who gets selected to go there? Do you have to be the best guy in your squadron?
Yeah, you have to be in the top tier of your squadron. There's some things you have to work at, some timing, some other things beyond your control. And you don't get ranked. There's not like a board that says Dave Berke is number 1 and somebody else is number 2, but there's definitely a tier that you need to be in. And there are some certifications where the squadron kind of can judge you along the way, and you need to be at the top, towards the top of your peer group to be selected.
So you got selected to go to Top Gun school.
Yeah.
Okay guys, so at the beginning of that little chunk, they talk about scrapping in the sky, which is dogfighting. Now, to me, this is like jousting. It's like 2 knights going up there and you're going to joust each other. So it really tests your mettle. And I can remember feeling, a little bit of like, all right, today's going to be intense, knowing that you're going to go through probably 5 or 6 different dogfights on each flight. Something that we would do when I was flying the F-15E is they would pick someone who could hold their own, and I enjoyed being this guy when they selected me to do it, but they essentially put you up in the airspace. And then they would have other members of your squadron just kind of jump you. So essentially it's like a knife fight in a phone booth. All of a sudden someone just pops up and you're kind of that guy who's just kind of roaming around waiting for someone to pick a fight with you. And people would do that. They would just jump you, you would dogfight them, and then if that person won, then they would stay up there and they would be like the king of the mountain. So a lot of these dogfight type things, they go back to the basics of human nature, of scrapping, kind of like Jocko Willink brings up. So I like reducing some of these super technical things to just the basics. At the end of the day, when you take off for a dogfight, you're just ready to rock and you're in the moment, you're present, you're ready to fight, especially if you're that person who's in the center of the airspace, just turning circles, waiting for someone to jump you. So being concerned and aware of what's going on around you is definitely a skill that you learn through dogfighting.
I'm going to assume that most people now have seen the movies, so I'm not going to give anything away.
Yeah.
But there's a theme about as technology moves on, as technology gets better, a lot of people buy into the idea that, better technology wins. Now, you and I both know that is not true. Now, technology helps. Technology is awesome. But in the end, especially when you're fighting one against one or force against force, it comes down to the person flying the machine. And that's the cool thing about aviation is airplanes are really good equalizers. They wanted to keep with the theme that the person in the box, the man in the box.
All right, I love them talking about technology because a lot of people, especially nowadays, will fall back and be like, it's automated, technology will handle it. But there's something about knowing that if the technology fails or if you're just having to rely on yourself, you can handle it. And I think that's a life lesson we can all take away, but it certainly applies to dogfighting. And what I noticed is sometimes there were some pilots who would rely too heavily on the technology, literally just staring at the screens in front of them like it's a video game. And meanwhile, a fighter jet goes, and that's the person they're supposed to be fighting. They should be looking outside, taking in all the different information. That's where the juice and the sweet spot of life is as well, in my opinion. It's just having your eyes wide open, taking in information from a lot of different places, and then being able to integrate that with technology and not, being on our phone all day long. Who does that? never been that guy.
And then how about the mission profile? First of all, what was the reason why they needed to use an F-18 instead of an F-35 or some other mechanism, like a TLAM or something like that?
They made a comment that I think to allow them to use the F-18, which was, hey, this is the ideal mission for the F-35, but the GPS jamming negates the weapons.
So that goes back to not relying on technology. They're talking about the mission in Top Gun Maverick when they essentially have to drop dumb bombs that are not GPS guided due to a GPS denied environment. But again, it goes back to having the basic skill sets. We called it clock to map to ground sometimes when you would fly low level missions and you would literally just be looking at a clock and a map and features on the ground and finding your way to certain target areas. So being able to go back to some of the basic skills, I mean, you can apply that now, like maybe knowing a little bit of hand-to-hand combat, knowing how to shoot a firearm, having supplies in case something goes wrong. Like these types of things are going back to the basics as humans, and we've kind of lost these things as, society has become more technological, more advanced. Don't worry, everything will be provided for you. But I think it's cool that they're showing like these fighter pilots are going back to the basics. And it just makes you remember that you can do it. If all technology goes away, we still have skills as people. And it's a smart thing to hone those. And that's what fighter pilots have done and continue to do. So I think it's cool that they brought that in to Top Gun Maverick. But it's definitely a life lesson that I try to apply to myself. I hope it helps you as well, my friend.
Okay, the physical aspect of being a fighter pilot. What's the reality there? You got Tom Cruise, you got all these people making it look like it's all hard. How hard is it for real? Come on.
The reality is I'm sitting across from Jocko Willink, Navy SEAL, and the reality is it's not like this all the time, but flying fighters is exhausting sometimes, like very physically demanding, and there are components of flying that physiologically are really, really hard, and I think they wanted to depict those segments. Now, it's not usually quite as sustained, as difficult as it is. There's elements of flight that are like downright boring, like navigating to and from. You're just sitting there. You're just sitting in a cockpit.
So I like that they're hitting on that. And for you aviation buffs out there, I'll tell you a quick story. I remember flying in what's called a poopy suit. It's a dry suit. And we would use those when we would fly over extremely cold oceans. We did a double turn that day. Each flight was about an hour and 45 minutes. We did dogfighting. We did low level. We did air interdiction, which is just a fancy way of saying practicing dropping bombs and then practicing air to air. But I remember getting home, and I got home at probably like 6 p.m. And I just laid down on the couch to take a nap. I woke up the next morning at 9 a.m. I mean, my body was literally like, hey, bro, we are done. Because the physiological side is just a fancy way of saying, like, your body's not used to being up at altitude, breathing pure oxygen, and squeezing all the muscles in your body to pull G-forces while wearing a suit that has rubber around your neck, your hands, your feet, to keep you safe in case you had to eject in that ocean. There's just so many different factors that go into it that it's just a very dynamic environment. Dynamic. I like that word.
One thing that was interesting was there was one part where a pilot screwed something up and he's like, this is my fault. Is that standard? Taking ownership? Or did you put that in there?
At Top Gun, it's pretty standard. By the time you get there, you have figured out early on in your career that the standard litany of excuses that you're going to make, first of all, they haven't been tolerated by anybody else. Nobody wants to hear your excuses. And after a while, you come to realize that anything that didn't go well is actually your fault. It's doubly true if you spent your life by yourself in an airplane. I mean, who else are you going to blame for anything that's gone wrong? So the best pilots early on come to grips that any problem that's been created out there is your fault. And, a little humility and whatnot. But yeah, despite what you might see, the humility that most aviators have to be successful is recognizing that if something went wrong, it's your fault.
I really enjoyed that clip. And since you made it to the end of the video, this is where the real juice is. And I'm a man of my word. I'm going to give you that extra bonus. And to me, extreme ownership that Jocko Willink talks about is one of the key principles that I personally try to instill in my life. Like, if I'm not working hard, if I'm not cranking out these videos for you, it's no one else's fault but mine. And when I thought about, the fighter squadrons, if there was ever someone who was making excuses, and maybe you've seen someone like this at your job, you just kind of don't want to be around them. And who wants to live their life as the person that you don't want to be around. I mean, nobody does, right? And in my mind, it comes down to taking ownership. Like, if you're able to take ownership, you really create a place where people can trust you. And they know that even if you mess up, hey, it's okay. We all make mistakes. We're all human. But if you're able to just be like, hey guys, that one's on me, my bad. Like, I'll stay late and fix it. People develop a lot of respect for you, and I encourage all of us to do some self-reflection and see, are we doing that? I try to do that on a regular basis. Thanks so much for being here, my friend. If you wouldn't mind, before you go, just dominate that like button for me, and hey, maybe even subscribe. So glad to have you here. Most of all, have a great day.